On September 30th, the FCC announced a settlement with T-Mobile related to three data breaches from 2021, 2022, and 2023. This settlement included an almost $16 million fine and an equal amount investment in improving T-Mobile's cybersecurity program. And I want to talk about this because it specifically mentions Zero Trust, but it's also relevant to really any enterprise. Now, the first caveat is I have no specific or special insight into what's going on at T-Mobile, other than I am a T-Mobile customer, and my personal data was included in the breach, which kind of sucks. But T-Mobile obviously is a telecommunications mobile provider, and we can all imagine the scale and complexity of this environment, as well as the degree to which they are subject to a constant and ongoing amount of attempted fraud by criminals. And this isn't to defend them having these breaches, but it isn't, I think, important to understand, as a consumer-facing organization that, literally puts commercials on during the Super Bowl and other high-profile events, and the knowledge among malicious actors that they have, whatever the percentage is, 80 or 100 million U.S. citizens' personal information, financial information, and the ability to leverage mobile carrier contact and use that as a mechanism for further fraud makes them a big target there. Again, I'm not defending this, but I think it's important to understand they are one of the probably most targeted organizations that we see. So the interesting thing about the settlement is that T-Mobile agrees specifically to invest almost $16 million in security improvements. And I'm going to read a little bit from the settlement because it has some details in there. So specifically what they're saying is they're going to spend $15.75 million over the next 2 years to strengthen its cybersecurity program, which the FCC states is significant and long overdue investment. So there are 6 things that they indicate that that T-Mobile has to do specifically. One is improve corporate governance. So have the CISO report to the board regularly on progress in their cybersecurity program. Second, implement a modern zero trust architecture. And segment the network, reduce the blast radius. These are words literally from the FCC settlement there. Third, improve their identity and access management program, specifically enforcing phishing-resistant MFA throughout the network. Data minimization and deletion, so data security program. Critical asset inventory, identifying and tracking critical assets on the network, and then independent third-party assessments. So all of these things are good. In fact, I would say that they're really necessary best practices for an enterprise of any size to take. And it's certainly unfortunate that it took 3 big data breaches, the compromise of so many people's personal information, for T-Mobile to work to improve these things. And the settlement also states, interestingly, that they recognize that implementing these practices is going to require significant investments, and it says, quote, to do so at T-Mobile scale will likely require expenditures an order of magnitude greater than the civil penalty here. So they're saying, well, in order to do this, they're actually going to have to invest up to maybe $150, $160 million to do this, which seems like a very large number for sure. But it, I think, depends on the degree of technical debt and process debt that T-Mobile has in their infrastructure. So clearly, I think this is a important thing to pay attention to. Not every organization is going to be subject to this large of a fine or to this high profile of a punishment. Most organizations won't be subject to as high profile data breaches as well. But I think that's a really good list of improvements to look at and think about. Are we doing the basics well? How are we moving forward to zero trust? How do we avoid this type of publicly visible, damaging type of data breaches or attacks on our infrastructure? And I think this is a testament to the fact that zero trust has become mainstream and it has become recognized as best practices for organizations. So think about this. Make sure you are doing the basics. If not well, at least you're doing the basics and you have a foundation for improvement there. Let's all make sure that we really understand what's running on our network. Start with coarse grain segmentation if you can. please enforce MFA and phishing-resistant MFA, especially if you're in the type of environment where you're going to be under attack by malicious actors or fraudsters. One final thought before we close. The settlement states that, quote, when organizations that have data on individuals fail to act as responsible stewards for this data, they externalize the costs onto everyday Americans. And I think that's an interesting statement. I'm not a big fan of overly intrusive government regulations, but I am a big fan of reasonable government regulations. I'm a capitalist and I believe in capitalism, but I also believe that unrestrained capitalism has extremely harmful effects to us as consumers and to our society and to our economy. And I think that it's a fact of life that we have certain organizations, certain enterprises that we as human beings are dependent on: telecommunications providers, hospitals, critical infrastructure providers. And in today's world, all of these organizations have digital data about us and have responsibility to provide us with a reasonable level of security for that data and a reasonable level of confidence that those services will continue to be in place and provide us with what they do, because they're critical infrastructure. So as an enterprise, I mean, clearly think about what is your level of responsibility to your customers and how do you make sure you up your game so that you're providing a reasonable, hopefully a good, strong level of security, and that you're meeting your requirements, not just as a profit-oriented organization, but as an organization that has responsibility for our digital infrastructure and our digital lives. Thank you. Have a good day.